Hi there, this is another video accompanying the Joomla tutorial series developing an MVC component, and in this step we're looking at adding a modal. Now if you've gone through and set up the code as defined in this step, then you can go into your menu, and whenever you click new to get a new menu item, and whenever you choose the Hello World menu item, then you will see appearing this, and this, when we press select, results in this modal appearing. And as you can see, this is a much nicer interface really for someone to select a hello world greeting. You've got reordering capability just as you have in the hello world's view. You can do in searching and all that sort of stuff. So it's a lot more pleasant an interface for the administrator. And then at the end of the day, you can click on Goodbye World, and Goodbye World comes up there. And what's more important is that behind here, we have also got the ID of the Goodbye World greeting, so that whenever we press save and this form is submitted back to the server, the ID of Goodbye World goes back, and then we get a menu item with the Goodbye World hello message output on the site. So you can obviously try that with your own code. Now, how does this all work? Now, I guess the first thing to say is that the modal functionality within Joomla is based on Bootstrap. So you can follow this link in the tutorial to the Bootstrap documentation, or you can go onto W3 Schools and find a little bit about Bootstrap there. It's got quite a good tutorial. But what we've got on this page, we've got what I've called a main window here, which is basically this stuff here. And then when we click on the select button there, we get this modal shown, and I've got this described over here. So this is what we get when we press select. And the idea is that we've got a number of records which are displayed on this form, and they've got an on-click listener on the greetings column. So whenever we click on any of those items in the greetings column, it fires that on-click listener, and then we call a function from that on-click listener back inside the main window. And within that function there, this is the key thing that sets up the greetings and the ID field. So the greetings field goes into here, and the ID field is hidden. But when we then press save, it goes up to the server within the post request. So that's it in a nutshell. Let's go through it in a bit more detail and see how these things relate to our code in the tutorial. So I've mentioned there are a few things on the page. So if we set our developer tools with F12, I'm in Chrome this time, and we look at these elements here. These are the elements which are associated with our field definition here. And this is the stuff that specifies what goes into that field. And whenever you have something like this, which extends JForm field, then Joomla expects you to provide two functions within that. Get input, which basically is looking for the input fields, and get label, which is looking for the HTML for the label fields, or the label field. And that's what we've got here. We have got, in our first instance, we have got here is our label field. So that is what is returned, the HTML that is returned from our get label. And here we have our input fields. And if we go down here, we can see we've got an input field here. And this really just at the moment has got text in it, which it shows the word select. And if we go and select a button, or press the select button and select something there, then it will actually have goodbye world in it. So the same input field here is used for just select in the first instance the word or the name of the greeting we've selected. And if we go back to our code and we look down it, here is where we're outputting that input field. This colon, or this ID, as it says here, this ID will be set to JForm request XXX, where XXX is the name of the field, and here we've got ID as the name of the field. So this ID here will be set to JForm request underscore ID, and our select field here is JForm request underscore ID underscore name. And if we look at that there, you can see that JForm request ID name there. Then the next thing we've got is we've got a button, which is the select button. And notice this has got a data toggle of modal, which means that this is the button that our Bootstrap JavaScript will be looking for, and when that is clicked, it will set in place the modal, and the modal is defined by the href modal select hello world JForm request ID. So Bootstrap will look for an HTML element with that ID, and it will set that in place as the modal, and we'll see that just in, well, it's actually down here. This is our modal stuff here. So whenever we press this button, Bootstrap is going to know from the data toggle equals modal that this is modal. This is going to be the target, and this is what it's going to display. The other thing that we've got here is the clear button. And let me just check that's right. Clear, yeah. So we haven't got it displayed there because we haven't got anything selected, but if we select something there, the clear button will appear. Okay, so that, if we go back to our code, here's our code for the select button. Notice the data toggle equals modal, and notice the href, which is specifying the target. And here's our clear button, and whenever we press that, it just runs this function which really clears the value from the other field and sets the select button to be displayable. Okay, so that's that. The modal elements is the next one. And if we look here, here are the modal elements. And you notice it's got a header and a body and a footer. And if we look at our code, that's what is coming in here. So we're providing information for the modal there, and we're calling a function render modal, and if we look at that in our code, it will run this function here. In my instance it's in library CMS HTML bootstrap.php, render modal, and what it's going to do is it's going to render this layout here. So if we look in Joomla modal main, in our layouts directory, Joomla modal, and you can see the various parts of the modal here. If we click on main, this is where it's outputting the various bits and pieces, all the JavaScript, all the HTML for the modal. And if you look at the modal body, there's an iframe there. So what happens is whenever you select something here, this is our modal header, this is our modal footer, this is our modal body here, and what is here is an iframe. So this is basically like kind of like a document within a document. It's got its own URL for getting stuff, and it can do posts and all that sort of stuff within this iframe. And you'll notice that that is really only set whenever you click on the modal. So if I clear this, if I go back to network and clear this, whenever I do a select, that is when the URL, the HTTP GET request is made to actually fill in the data for that modal. So it gets it at the very last minute, not whenever you initially come into this form, but when you select this. And then the final thing in here is our input type equals hidden, so this isn't visible, and this is the ID field, and notice the name JForm request ID. So whenever we submit this form, this is what is going to go up into the in the post to the server. So if we select something, goodbye world, you'll see here that its value is 41, which is the ID associated with our goodbye world record. And when we, as I say, when we hit the submit button through save or save and close, this is going to be sent up to the server. Right, so that's those aspects there. Now, whenever we click on the select button, the modal is going to be shown. The URL for that is going to then be kind of associated with the iframe. So if we look at our code, it's going to be in the header script. This is our JavaScript code, and if we look here, we can see that we're including a JavaScript function here. And if we cycle down, here's our function here, JSelect hello world JForm request ID. And just below that, you can see that whenever you get this modal being shown, then it sticks on this iframe and it passes to the iframe as an attribute the source, which is the URL that the data is going to be got from. So whenever we click on the select button, the iframe is generated, and if we look at our code, then we can see where we specify that iframe, or sorry, iframe URL. And here it is down here. So we're looking at sending an iframe URL of com hello world, view equals hello worlds. So it's going to be similar to our component hello worlds view within the admin. Layout equals modal. So we're going to be looking for a modal.php layout file. tmpl equals component. And this is quite important because this means that it's going to be a component.php template that is going to be run. So if you look in your templates directory, administrator templates, ISIS, you've got a component.php file there, and that's the template which is going to be run. And it means that whenever you run it, you don't get within the modal bits and pieces that you usually get up at the top, these menus of Joomla. If you click on the modal, you don't see any of those menus up at the top, and that's because we're running that component.php file. We've got a form token as usual, and then we're passing this function equals here. And what this function is, this is the same function as we have defined up here, which is our callback function. So it means that whenever we set up this URL here, this is the way that the modal knows which is our function to call back on to pass the selected ID back to the main window. So let's look next at our modal stuff, modal display. This is our views, so we just make sure in our views that we don't display the submenu or the little sidebar. And here's our display. Now notice a few things. First of all, the form action is different from our existing default.php. It's got the same sort of thing as we've got in the URL, and we need that because within our modal we can do things like do a select here, or click on the button here to reorder things, or do a search, and each of those will result in an HTTP request going up. So whenever we click on ID, it's going to send an HTTP request up because all of this is a form, and we need to make sure that the HTTP request is going to the same URL, and we do that by specifying the correct URL in our form here. Then the other thing to notice is what we are setting on our fields in here, these fields. So if we go back to our elements and we click on here, you can see what we've got in our fields here. We've got, this is a link, but it's not doing anything. But it has got important information associated with it. It's got the function that we need to call back on. It's got the ID and the title. And whenever we click on it, well, that's where our little JavaScript comes in here. Because what our JavaScript is doing is that it's adding in an event listener on each of our fields here. Goodbye world, hello world, hi there. All of these have got an event listener set up through here. And it's choosing those by looking for items with select link there. So each of these here will have a class of select link. And for each of those, it's going on, it's adding an event listener. It's getting the function name that it needs to call back on from the data function attribute. And if we just remind ourselves there, that's this data function. So this is the function we need to call back on. And it's getting the other attributes like data ID and particularly data title from that HTML element there. And it's sending those back in our callback function to the main window, to this function within the main window. Now there's just a couple of little things about this JavaScript here which may be a bit new to you. The first is this kind of format, open brackets function, and this is known commonly as an immediately invoked function expression. So you can look at this page for a little bit of background about that and how it works. And it basically means that this function is just invoked and run immediately, and it also doesn't have a name, so it's kind of like an anonymous function, so it doesn't add in more variables into the global scope. And the second thing to notice is window parent dot function name and this square brackets here. And really within this window dot parent refers to the window associated with the outside bit on our page here, this bit here. And we have defined in that outside bit, we have defined a function, which is our callback function. So if we go back here, this is our function here. And this function is really like a property of the window object. So whenever we want to access it, we can either access it by calling window.parent.function name, i.e. .jselect hello world jform request ID, or you can equally access properties of an object by using the bracket notation, which is brackets and then this as a string. And in this case, because we've got this as a string, this is the best way to access this function. And then we just pass the parameters to it. And if we look at our function back in here, we'll see that it's calling something called process modal select. And our process modal select is part of our Joomla. Let me just find it here. System modal fields. Modal fields. Let's look at this. And if we go down here, we've got process modal select, and it's just calling process modal parent, which is doing things like setting our field ID and field title, and these refer to these two fields here in our elements. Or let me find these again for you. This. So this is the field that is referenced by this here, field ID, get element by ID, field prefix, which is going to be the jform request underscore ID, and then it adds on ID at the end, and name is the other one. So this is our one with name ID on, and the other one up here is the one with name on. So what the code is basically doing is it's setting the values of those fields to be either the ID that's passed in the parameter, or in this case it's going to be the title. So in that way we have the ID and the title coming back from our modal back into our main window, and via this mechanism it's setting up the greeting and ID fields, and also that function is setting up the hide and the show of the select and clear buttons as required. And then obviously when we send the post, we've got that ID field that was selected in the modal. So hopefully that all makes a little bit of sense to you. As I say, you can go through the tutorial and see a number of these aspects that are actually brought out in the text here. So the final thing is, if you want to try some things yourself, here are some suggestions. First of all, you could add into your field definition, which is up here. Field definition, just another line, default equals, and then pass in quotes the ID of the field you want. So you want default equals quotes 41 quotes, if 41 is the ID of the default hello world record, and you should see that then getting displayed immediately in the select field here. So you can try that, fairly simple. You can add another modal hello world field into the same, just add another field here, but call it XXX. And calling it XXX means that it's more easy to identify it in stuff down here, because there are a lot of IDs around the place. So having it as XXX just makes it stand out a wee bit more. You can change your callback function name, and if we go down here, we've called it JSelect Hello World, and then this ID. Now, whenever you've got two fields, this is going to be called twice, this function, once for each field, and it's going to end up with two different functions there. And you really, if you've got a number of different fields in here, you do need to have two different callback functions. So if you're doing this and changing that callback function name, you maybe need to strip this bit out. The next thing you can try is, well, you could try it by removing the TMPL equals component, removing this bit, and just see what you end up with. And the other thing you do is find your component.php in the template directory, admin template directory, and just put in some HTML into that, and just check that whenever you click on the modal here, that it actually displays it. So just sort of a bit of reassurance that that indeed is the file that you're actually running. Now, the final thing is that there are a number of other components which generate modals in the same sort of area within this menu item here. So for example, you can select an article or a contact, and whenever you get do that, you can then, did I select the right one? Yes, I did. You've got things like a create button. Just close that. Or you've got an edit button. And here what it is, it's showing the edit equivalent for editing a record, the modal equivalent of our edit screen. So what you can do is you can go through the Joomla standard functionality. Hello World Administrator, let's look at content. And you'll find the same sort of thing. If we go to articles, you'll find modal.php equivalent. And we will also find things like models, fields, modal, article.php, which is the equivalent of our modal field definition. And you can pretty much take that code and copy it and just do a global replace of content or article by hello world, and it pretty much works by itself. For the edit screen like this, you'll need to also take account of the edit view, this one here for a single article. In our case, we had our edit view under hello world. I've just created one here for the sake of this demo. But if you look in there, you've got edit PHP and you've also got modal PHP. And modal.php, well, it doesn't really output at all. What it really says, it just says set layout edit and then run the edit one. So it's going to basically run this edit one, but within that edit one, then it's got some stuff here which says, well, if we're really in the case of a modal, there are some things that are going to be different here. So as I say, if you look at the code for, say, com content and copy the equivalents to our files here, you should be able to get it working. And I'll just show you that here. Let's close that down. This installs. And then when you click on Hello World, then you will see these other buttons like Create, which will show you, give you the ability to create a new Hello World record, or if you select one, then you should be able to edit that. Okay, well, if you decide to do that, have fun, and hopefully you find this interesting, and thanks very much for listening. Bye.